Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the sumptuous lobby of the Hotel Sinclair Grand, the crystal chandeliers reflected the light from the large bay windows, illuminating the white marble and golden columns. Robert Sinclair, the manager, adjusted his tailored suit while observing the staff with a condescending smile. His gaze fell on Mary Johnson, a discreet cleaning lady, but with a proud and calm appearance. "Mary," he said in a honeyed but mocking voice, "do you really think you belong here?" Mary, silently sweeping the floor near the lobby, looked up fearlessly. Her face remained impassive, but her eyes shone with a quiet intelligence. "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Sinclair," she replied in a soft but firm voice. Robert snorted and pulled a thick contract from his leather binder. "Let's see if you can figure this out. I bet you won't even know where to start." He handed her the document with a triumphant smile. Mary took it calmly, leafing through it carefully. To her surprise, Robert had chosen a written contract, in German, thinking that she wouldn't understand anything. Mary sat down on a chair, placed the document on her lap, and began reading aloud, fluently and clearly, each word perfectly articulated. Robert, convinced he was going to laugh at her, gradually felt his smile freeze. Each sentence she translated revealed clauses he hadn't noticed and that compromised his own decisions. The hall, once witness to his arrogance, suddenly seemed to hold its breath. Mary closed the contract with impressive calm and looked at him. "Perhaps you should reread your documents before judging someone," she said simply, leaving behind a lesson in humility and respect. Robert Sinclair stood frozen, unable to reply, as Mary walked away with the quiet dignity of someone who knows that intelligence and patience are the most formidable weapons against arrogance. The game had just begun. The next morning, the hotel lobby Sinclair Grand shone in the morning sun. Employees were busy, some still in shock from the previous day's incident. Robert Sinclair walked into the hall with a mixture of annoyance and misplaced pride. He had spent the night brooding over Mary Johnson and her incredible command of German. "Today I'm going to show him who runs this hotel," he muttered to himself, clutching another file in his hands. Mary pushed her cleaning cart, her movements precise and methodical. She didn't even notice Robert at first, concentrating on polishing the marble. Robert approached her, a sarcastic smile on his lips. "Mary, still here?" he said, handing her a new contract. "Try to understand this. I'm sure you won't know where to begin." Mary took the document without a word, fixing her clear gaze on him. "Very well, Mr. Sinclair. I'll read it." The director chuckled to himself. This contract was written in complex legal German. He was sure she would give up after a few sentences. But Mary sat calmly on a nearby chair. Her fingers ran confidently over the lines. Then, in a soft but firm voice, she began to read aloud. "According to the provisions of this contract, all executive decisions relating to hotel investments must be approved by the internal committee before any signature." Robert frowned. Every sentence she translated revealed clauses he hadn't noticed that exposed him to professional and financial errors. He felt his arrogance eroding. Mary continued, clearly explaining the implications of each section. "This means you can no longer make unilateral decisions regarding suppliers and renovation contracts. Any action to the contrary could result in legal penalties for the hotel." The manager remained silent, unable to formulate a reply. His employees, witnesses to the scene, watched in silence, admiring Mary's calm composure. She closed the contract, placed it on the table, and looked at him. "Mr. Sinclair, perhaps next time you should reread your documents before thinking they are a way to ridicule me." Silence fell in the hall. Robert felt the sting of humiliation, but for the first time, he could say nothing. Mary, her dignity intact, returned to her work as if nothing had happened. For Robert Sinclair, that day marked the beginning of a game whose outcome he could never have imagined. Mary was not simply a housekeeper, she was a force to be reckoned with. The next day, the Hotel Sinclair Grand seemed calmer than usual. Yet, there was a palpable tension in the air. Every employee knew something had changed since the German contract incident. Even the most demanding customers didn't notice this new dynamic, but Robert Sinclair felt it with every step. He walked into his office, his face grim, clutching another file that he believed was unassailable this time. He was determined to regain control. "This time I won't be fooled," he murmured, looking at the document. But Mary Johnson, true to her routine, walked past his desk with her cart, a quiet smile on her lips. Without his prompting, she glanced at the file. "Mr. Sinclair, do you need help with this document?" she asked calmly, as if unaware of the irritation she was causing. Robert, furious but trying to keep his composure, replied, "No, Mary. But, you can look if you want." His voice betrayed his doubt. Mary took the document, opened it, and began to skim through it. Her fingers skimmed each line with precision. She frowned slightly, as if spotting a mistake. Then, in a calm but clear voice, she explained. "Mr. Sinclair, this clause is contrary to hotel policies. If signed as is, the contract could be voided or even result in financial penalties." Robert felt his blood run cold. He had spent hours reviewing this contract, convinced it was perfect. And now Mary was calmly demonstrating that he had omitted a crucial detail. How did you notice that?" he stammered, unable to hide his embarrassment. Mary looked up, calm and confident. "I've worked with international contracts, Mr. Sinclair. It's part of my professional experience." The manager felt his arrogance vanish. Every word Mary said struck him as a reminder of his own underestimation. He had thought he could humiliate a cleaning lady. Instead, he found himself confronted with intelligence and competence he had never suspected. Mary closed the file and gently placed it back on the desk. "I advise you to review your documents carefully before making any hasty decisions. It's in your best interest, and that of the hotel." Robert stood there, staring at the contract. He had just realized, for the first time, that his arrogance could cost him dearly. And Mary, with her calm authority, had just transformed the playing field. In the lobby, the employees whispered to each other in admiration. The cleaning lady, who had always gone unnoticed, had just shown that intelligence, patience, and knowledge were far more powerful weapons than power and arrogance. That day, Robert Sinclair realized that he had not only underestimated Mary, he had opened the door to a reversal of which he had not even suspected the extent. The next morning, the atmosphere in the Hotel Sinclair Grand had changed. Even the lights in the lobby seemed less intimidating, as if reflecting the new dynamic that had taken hold. The employees, once intimidated by Robert Sinclair's arrogance, stood a little straighter, exchanging knowing glances whenever they passed Mary Johnson. Mary, true to form, pushed her cleaning cart through the corridors. But this time, murmurs of admiration and discreet smiles accompanied her every step. Colleagues who had once endured Robert's cutting remarks now found courage in her example. Robert, meanwhile, walked through the lobby with his usual haughty bearing, but his gestures were slightly hesitant. The memory of reading the contract in German haunted him. He felt as if every employee was looking at him with a mixture of respect and judgment. He walked into his office and tried to regain control. "No one must know that I was." He trailed off, searching for a word, embarrassed by Mary. But it was too late. The rumors had spread. Even Linda Thompson, the administrative assistant, who had always been distant and cold, approached Mary, whispering, "Mary, I never thought you could." Mary simply smiled and replied, "The important thing is to do the right thing, Linda." Robert watched from his office and felt his authority crumble further. Every admiring glance Mary received was a silent reminder that he had underestimated a woman he considered insignificant. As the day progressed, minor but significant incidents multiplied. When a demanding customer attempted to belittle an employee, Mary calmly intervened, explaining the situation with tact and authority. The other employees began to instinctively follow her lead, seeing her as a figure of stability and competence. Robert, furious but powerless, realized that simply humiliating her no longer had any effect. Mary had transformed a position of apparent vulnerability into one of unquestionable moral and intellectual authority. At the end of the day, as Mary walked by his desk, Robert felt a pang of admiration mixed with frustration. He knew he couldn't treat her the same way he used to. And for the first time, he wondered if arrogance and power were enough to dominate someone who could think and act with such calm and precision. That day, the domino effect began. The employees' fear of Robert Sinclair transformed into respect for Mary Johnson. And in that subtle but irreversible shift, the tables had turned. After several days, Robert Sinclair could no longer ignore the obvious: Mary Johnson was no mere housekeeper. Every action, every word seemed precisely calculated, and her ability to handle delicate situations far exceeded what he had imagined. One evening, alone in his office, Robert decided to dig into Mary's past. He discreetly ran a search on his computer, starting with publicly available information. What he discovered stunned him. Mary had studied languages and international law at Humboldt University in Berlin. Before becoming a housekeeper, she had worked as a translator and consultant for international companies, handling complex and sensitive contracts. Every document, every translation, every situation she encountered in the hotel now seemed to be illuminated in a new light. Robert reread the German contract she had translated for him. It wasn't just luck, she knew the language, the legalese, and the implications of the clauses perfectly. Every word spoken had been a silent reminder of her ignorance and her own arrogance. But there was more. Mary had never sought to boast or impress anyone. Her calm and discreet manner only added to her mysterious aura. Robert began to wonder why such a qualified woman had chosen a lowly position at his hotel. The next day, in the lobby, Robert watched Mary guide a difficult customer with a mixture of firmness and gentleness. Every gesture, every word, exuded experience and self-control. He began to feel a pang of envy mixed with respect. "Who would have thought," he whispered, almost to himself, "that I would have underestimated someone like her?" Mary, for her part, continued her work with the same rigor, aware of the curious and admiring glances. She knew that Robert would eventually discover her past, but she didn't need it to assert herself. Her authority came naturally from her intelligence, her patience, and her ability to remain unfazed by arrogance. This revelation about Mary's past marked a turning point for Robert. He could no longer treat her as he had before. Every future confrontation would be an intellectual duel, and he already sensed that the game would be far from over. In the corridors of the Sinclair Grand, the housekeeper who had become a symbol of respect and competence advanced silently, and behind her, the arrogance of the director began to crack. The hotel lobby Sinclair Grand was full that morning. Robert Sinclair had called a meeting to present new contracts to the employees, believing it would be an opportunity to reassert his authority. He held the document in his hand with a calculated smile, confident that no one would challenge his decisions. Mary Johnson entered as usual, pushing her cleaning cart, but this time the employees' eyes were fixed on her. Whispers ran through the hall, "She's the one who humiliated Robert Sinclair." Robert stepped forward and said, "Today we're going to review this new partnership agreement. I want everyone to understand its terms." He handed the document to Mary with a condescending smile. "Mary, perhaps you could explain it to the others," he said, thinking she would fail in public. Mary calmly took the file. Silence fell. All the employees stared at her, some slightly worried for her, others eager to see what would happen next. In a clear, calm voice, Mary began. "According to the terms of this contract, all decisions regarding the purchase of equipment and negotiations with suppliers must go through the validation committee. Any violation could result in significant penalties." Each sentence was punctuated with simple but precise explanations, and she pointed out ambiguous or incorrect sections that Robert had overlooked. The manager felt his face heat up as the admiring murmurs of the employees grew louder. Mary continued, highlighting the potential mistakes and risks for the hotel. If this contract were signed as is, the hotel could lose thousands of dollars and its image with investors would be compromised. Robert stood there frozen. Every word Mary spoke underscored his own mistakes and past arrogance. He had tried to humiliate a housekeeper, and now he was publicly exposed. The impressed employees exchanged admiring glances. For the first time, Mary was not only respected, she had become a model of competence and moral authority. Mary closed the file with sovereign calm and looked at Robert. "Mr. Sinclair, I strongly advise you to review your documents carefully before signing. This could save you from costly mistakes and preserve the hotel's honor." Silence fell over the lobby. Even the customers present held their breath, surprised by Mary's clarity and confidence. Robert, humiliated but forced to maintain dignity, looked away. For the first time, he realized that his position of authority was no match for the intelligence and patience of a woman he had once believed to be weak. That day, Mary Johnson had won a public victory. Her calm and poise had transformed a tense moment into a lesson in humility for the manager and a show of strength for the entire hotel. A few days after the public test, the Hotel Sinclair Grand there was relative calm. Yet, in Robert Sinclair's office, an invisible but palpable tension hung. Robert had spent several nights thinking about Mary Johnson, unable to accept that a simple cleaning lady had gotten the better of him, in public, and with such intelligence. That morning, determined to regain control, he decided to confront Mary directly. He waited for her outside the lobby, clutching a new contract file. "Mary," he said firmly, trying to mask his nervousness, "I want to understand why you keep challenging my authority." Mary stopped calmly, put down her cart, and looked him straight in the eye. Her face was serene, but every word she spoke carried weight. "Mr. Sinclair, I'm not challenging you. I'm simply showing you what you should have seen for yourself." Robert felt his arrogance waver. He had anticipated a conflict, a confrontation in which he would dominate. Instead, he found himself facing someone who spoke with natural authority, but without ever raising his voice. "But, how can you be so precise and," he paused, searching for words. "Confident in your analyses?" Mary shrugged slightly, a small smile playing on her lips. "Because I know my job, Mr. Sinclair. And because I respect this hotel and everyone who works here." The headmaster felt a mixture of frustration and admiration. Every word Mary said reminded him that he had underestimated her intelligence. He realized that no amount of yelling or threats could make her budge. Mary continued, "Authority doesn't come just from title or position. It comes from competence, patience, and the ability to remain calm in the face of others' mistakes." Robert fell silent. The words resonated within him, striking at his pride. He realized that for the first time, his position of power wasn't enough. He had to learn to listen, to respect, and to recognize talent. Mary picked up her cart and added, smiling slightly, "I'm here to help the hotel, not to fight you. But it's time to look at things differently, Mr. Sinclair." Robert stood there frozen, unable to respond. This confrontation, which he had imagined as a moment of dominance, had turned into a lesson in humility. He had met someone who was not intimidated by arrogance. That day, Robert Sinclair realized that Mary Johnson was not just a housekeeper, she was an intellectual and moral force, capable of putting him in his place without ever losing his dignity. In the following weeks, the Hotel Sinclair Grand continued to shine with its luxury and impeccable service, but a more subtle transformation was taking place behind the scenes. Employees, once intimidated by Robert Sinclair, now looked at Mary Johnson with admiration and respect. Even some customers had begun to notice her calm and efficient manner. One morning, Robert, still a little irritated by his loss of control, walked into the lobby and watched Mary organize the staff with quiet precision. He hesitated, then decided to speak to her directly. "Mary, I've noticed you handle certain situations better than I do," he admitted, his voice tinged with a rare humility. What do you suggest to improve the hotel?" Mary looked at him, surprised but not fazed. "Mr. Sinclair, this isn't just about me. It's about everyone who works here. We need clear contract procedures, better communication between departments, and regular training to avoid mistakes." Robert listened attentively, realizing that his own methods had often given way to arrogance and impulsiveness. Mary continued, "I can help you implement these changes. But for it to work, you'll need to listen to and trust those who really know their stuff." For the first time, Robert felt his pride was misplaced. He nodded and said, "Very well. I'm ready to learn." In the days that followed, Mary began proposing concrete improvements, protocols for validating contracts, weekly meetings to discuss problems, and internal training for staff. Employees, seeing Mary's sincerity and efficiency, became enthusiastic and committed. Robert Sinclair, for his part, had to admit that his position alone was not enough. He was slowly learning to collaborate, listen, and respect the skills of others. One evening, as the hotel was emptying, Robert watched Mary walk through the lobby. She pushed her cart with the same calmness she had on the first day, but now each step seemed charged with authority. He realized that humility, patience, and intelligence had become his greatest allies, and that Mary had taught him this lesson with an elegance he could never forget. That day, Robert Sinclair realized that Mary Johnson was more than just a housekeeper. She had become a pillar of the hotel, an example of competence, respect, and mastery. And he, for the first time, had to learn to follow rather than blindly lead. As the weeks passed, the influence of Mary Johnson within the Hotel Sinclair grandly grew. What had started as a simple challenge to Robert Sinclair's authority grew into a respected and indispensable presence. Every employee now knew that she possessed rare expertise and a problem-solving ability that no one else had. Robert, still somewhat reluctant, made a decision he would never have imagined a few months earlier. He appointed Mary as an internal consultant to oversee contracts and staff training. She continued her daily duties, but her official role now gave her undeniable moral and intellectual power. On her first day in her new role, Mary walked into Robert's office with a file in hand. "Mr. Sinclair, I have prepared proposals to improve supplier management and avoid contractual errors." Robert, sitting behind his desk, looked up and smiled, a mixture of respect and shyness in his expression. "Very well, Mary. Show me what you've got going." Mary presented her ideas with clarity and confidence. She explained how to centralize communications, establish strict approval procedures, and strengthen staff training to avoid misunderstandings or costly errors. Each point was logical, precise, and easily implemented. The employees witnessing this interaction understood that Mary was no longer just a cleaning lady, she had become a professional reference. Even Robert could not help but follow, recognizing the accuracy of her suggestions. In the following days, Mary implemented her recommendations. The weekly meetings became learning opportunities for the entire staff. Problems that had previously seemed intractable were quickly resolved thanks to her methodology. Guests also noticed the difference. The hotel ran more smoothly and efficiently, reinforcing its reputation for luxury and perfection. Robert, observing all this, began to change profoundly. He understood that authority resided not only in title or power, but in competence, humility, and the ability to lead with intelligence. Mary, with her calm and self-possession, had taught him a lesson that no amount of arrogance could ever replace. One evening, as the hotel quieted under the chandeliers, Mary pushed her cart through the lobby, watching the staff bustle about. Every smile, every respectful bow, every gesture of admiration was a silent reminder of the impact she now had. Robert, from behind his desk, looked at her and whispered, "Mary, you have become the heart of this hotel." And for the first time, he felt there was no shame in following someone more competent than himself. One morning, the Hotel Sinclair Grand hosted a delegation of international investors to discuss new partnerships. Robert Sinclair, dressed in his most impeccable suit, thought he could shine in front of them. He wanted to show that he was in control of the situation and that the hotel remained under his control. Mary Johnson, true to her routine, strolled through the lobby with her cart. But this time, her role would go beyond cleaning. She was at the heart of the presentation, ready to intervene if necessary. The meeting began in the large conference room. Robert confidently presented the new contracts, explaining the key clauses. But when an investor asked a complex question about certain contractual obligations and their financial implications, Robert hesitated, visibly confused. Before he could attempt a hesitant reply, Mary calmly stepped forward. "Mr. Sinclair, if I may," she said gently but firmly. All eyes turned to her. Mary explained the details of the clauses, identifying risks and proposing concrete solutions. Her precision, mastery of legal terms, and ability to anticipate consequences immediately impressed the investors. Robert felt his face heat up. He had wanted to lead the meeting and demonstrate his authority. Instead, it was Mary who commanded attention. The investors took notes and nodded, visibly reassured and impressed by her skills. An investor asked, "This presentation is exceptional. Could you oversee the management of our future contracts with the hotel?" Mary replied calmly, "With pleasure. My role is to ensure transparency and security of operations for the hotel and its partners." Robert, humiliated but forced to maintain dignity, felt every word as a reminder of his own past mistakes. Mary had transformed what could have been a fiasco into a dazzling display of competence. At the end of the meeting, as the investors left the room expressing their satisfaction, Robert looked at Mary and whispered, almost to himself, "You saved the hotel, again." Mary, impassive but satisfied, simply nodded. She hadn't sought to publicly humiliate Robert. Her authority came naturally from her intelligence and mastery of situations. That day, Mary Johnson's reputation within the hotel and among its international partners was definitively established. Robert Sinclair understood, once and for all, that arrogance alone was never enough in the face of competence and patience. Mary was no longer simply respected, she had become indispensable. A few weeks after the meeting with investors, the Hotel Sinclair Grand held an internal ceremony to celebrate recent successes and announce new improvements. All employees were present, including Robert Sinclair, who had learned to walk with more humility and listen to those around him. Mary Johnson entered the lobby as usual, but this time the admiring glances and warm smiles of her colleagues seemed to light her way. The director, standing on the platform, spoke. "Today we celebrate not only the hotel's achievements, but also those who helped make them possible," he announced, his voice clear and solemn. "And it's time to recognize someone who transformed the way we work, someone who showed us what skill, patience, and intelligence can accomplish." All eyes turned to Mary. Robert stepped forward and, for the first time, his tone was sincere. "Mary Johnson, thank you. Thank you for your exceptional work, for your patience, and for the humbling experience you have given me. You have become the heart of this hotel, and I am honored to have you with us." Mary remained calm, her smile discreet but warm. She bowed slightly, receiving applause from the staff and guests. This long-awaited moment finally sealed her official recognition. As the ceremony continued, Robert realized that everything had changed. Arrogance had given way to respect, authority based on title had been replaced by authority based on competence and wisdom. Mary, with her calm and intelligence, had not only won the day, but she had also transformed the hotel and those who worked there. Later, in his office, Robert spoke to Mary privately. "I don't think I would have ever understood the value of certain things without you. You taught me to listen, to think before I act, and to respect talent, regardless of a person's status." Mary smiled softly. "It was never my role to teach you, Mr. Sinclair. But sometimes life presents us with situations that speak for themselves." Robert nodded, aware that he had just undergone a profound transformation. He had learned the most important lesson of all: humility and respect are more powerful forces than arrogance and power. Through the hotel corridors, Mary pushed her cart, each gesture measured and elegant. The employees greeted her respectfully, and Robert, now a changed manager, followed her with admiration and gratitude. The arrogance of the past was gone, replaced by a poise based on respect, competence, and wisdom. Thus ended the story of Mary Johnson, a housekeeper who became a symbol of intellectual power, patience and humility, capable of transforming a man and a hotel through the sheer force of her knowledge and dignity.